Hey everybody, welcome to How to Stand Out to BYU Admissions and any other colleges too. My name is Christian Hansen from TopCollegeGuru.com. In this presentation, you're going to walk away with a couple things. You're going to learn what BYU is looking for, how the BYU application works, and we're going to talk about some proven strategies that you can use to stand out to BYU and any other university. Now, to help you really implement and put these ideas into practice, I've created a free report called The 3 Essential Questions on Every College Application and How to Answer Them. If you'd like to get a copy of this completely free report, simply go to topcollegeguru.com/BYU and just let me know where to send it. Now, to start off, I got a question. What would you do if you were in a situation where you saw an important thing, you observed an important thing happening, and no one else saw it? Well, that's what happened to me. Let me kind of set this up for you. So, I got my undergraduate degree at BYU. Later, I completed my master's degree at the London School of Economics in the UK. Later, I got my job out of college in the BYU Admissions Committee, working in financial aid services and also reading applications for the admissions cycle. I was also an academic advisor, helping students navigate the process. Now, one day, my colleagues and I were in a meeting where we were going over some special cases for the admissions process. And that day, we were kind of all in a little bit of a bad mood. It was at the end of the day. We were a little bit tired, and we'd been denying a lot of students that day, right? We were kind of struggling a little bit. Now, all of a sudden, at the end of the meeting, there was this one application that was put up on the screen, and we're kind of reading through it, and it was as if, the Grinch's hearts, how the Grinch stole Christmas, how the Grinch's heart was really small. Well, all of a sudden, all of our hearts started to grow 10 times bigger because there was something about how the student communicated and presented themselves that just influenced everybody in the room. And one by one, I watched as every one of my colleagues gave their thumbs up and said, this is the kind of student that we need to have at BYU. And that student was admitted. Now, as my colleagues were gathering their things and walking out to go to their next meetings and to wrap up for the day, I sat there completely stunned because I asked myself, what just happened? How did that student just win over an entire room of professionals? Now, the grades were okay. The ACT scores, nothing special, right? They were okay. They're average. But it was in something in how the student presented themselves and how they wrote that completely just won us all over. How did they do that? So I took that student's profile and I went back to my office and I studied their application. What did they say? How did they say it, right? And every time that a student had the same effect on me, on my colleagues, I took notes and I started to study what were things that they said and did and how did they say them. And I started to see a consistent set of patterns, habits, and techniques that these master communicators were using, whether they knew it or not. Later, I became the associate director of the full-time MBA program at UC Irvine. I was responsible for recruiting students from all over the Asia-Pacific region, Korea, China, Japan, Taiwan, India, as well as the Western United States. And again, I was seeing these patterns and these same things consistently were making people stand out. Now, I had a very good friend of mine who was making a career shift from being a chiropractor into he needed to find some sort of business. He found out he had a disease that made it difficult for him to continue to be a chiropractor. So we were chatting, and we kind of discovered that HR would be a really great field for him, right? And I said, an MBA would be a perfect place for you to transition and to, pivot into your career. And I said, in fact, our program would be an excellent fit for you, but I feel conflicted if I don't want to interview you or anything. I said, but let me teach you some of these things that I've observed consistently make people stand out. And then you go through the process, you go through my colleagues. I don't want to, be a part of this at all. Just want to make sure I'm on the right ethical line here. So I taught him these principles. We practiced a couple things, and then he went through the whole application process. I didn't hear how it went until I was at an admissions committee meeting one day where his file came up for review. And I watched as all of my colleagues just went through his application. They went over his responses, and they just said, we're so surprised. We never would have imagined that a chiropractor would have these kinds of abilities. And, how is he able to really communicate so effectively? And they said, this is the kind of student that we need to have here. We think he can be really successful. And I watched as every one of my colleagues gave the thumbs up and said, this is the kind of student that we need to have in our program. it was in that moment that I realized I had found lightning in a bottle. I discovered some things, strategies, habits, techniques that consistently made people stand out regardless of their grades, GPA, right, and ACT scores and other things. So also in my career, I worked for LG Electronics in corporate HR, helping run internship programs in Korea and China for LG, and I worked in ultra high net worth financial services for the Whittier Trust in Newport Beach. And again, across the board, I saw these same techniques, habits, and patterns consistently made people stand out in the environment. So as far as I can tell, I'm one of the only people that I've ever met that's ever worked behind the scenes at every major crossroads that students go through after they leave high school. I've worked in undergraduate admissions, graduate admissions, corporate HR, as well as in business development. And in every case, again, what works across the board, helping students and people stand out. So that's when I decided to launch topcollegeguru.com, where I could use the college application as a platform, as a vehicle for teaching students these higher and longer lasting life coaching principles. Now, and as I built my business and helped students and families, they all said, you got to write a book. You got to put this somewhere. And so I did. I wrote The Influence Mindset, the art and science of getting people to choose you. It turns out that our brains are wired to pay attention to certain things. And when you simply communicate in a level and in a way that a brain is predisposed to pay attention to, then you're going to be more influential. You're going to have that X factor. Well, once it was published, the LinkedIn put it in the top 10 list for marketing. And also, it became a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And as I've continued to grow my business in coaching and mentoring students on how to navigate not just college, but life, I've been ranked as one of the top undergraduate admissions coaches by Leland.com. So again, my vision here is obviously I help students with college, but I'm more concerned about helping prepare them for life. Now, how does this connect to what we're talking about, which is BYU? Well, let's kind of set the ground here for what BYU is looking for, right? What are some of their stats? And then let's talk about how these higher principles can help you stand out in the admissions process, okay? So first of all, the acceptance rate is about 69.7%. That's pretty good, right, compared to a lot of other really competitive colleges. A key thing here is this November 1st deadline, right, for the application. It is critical that you get your application in by November 1st. You get an extra little bump in consideration, right? It's an easy, low-hanging fruit to make sure that you get extra help in your application. The regular deadline is December 15th, and they notify everybody of the decisions, typically the Friday right before President's Day weekend. In this case, it'll be February 19th, okay? Now, in terms of GPA and stuff, a couple things here to consider. The middle 50% is 3.86 to 4.0. Now, BYU only looks at your unweighted GPA. And so, it's a very competitive academic situation. 386 is kind of, the lower end there. Now, in terms of your ACT, the middle 50% is a 27 to 32. We're going to be talking more about the test optional thing and whether or not you should submit your score. But to put it simply, I advise students, if you're not hitting a 27 with your ACT or with your SAT in that same range, I'd recommend not submitting it and just going with your GPA, right? But keep in mind that 60%, right, 59.4% of students who are accepted right now, they chose to share their test scores for the admission cycle. So there is some advantage to making sure that that you're sharing your score and that they see it. So let's talk about a couple other things. The BYU application. There are 5 personal insight questions with 1,500 characters for each of the essays. And you have 2 additional activity essays coming in at 300 introduction and then also 1,500 development, right? So most college applications have maybe 2, 3 essays, but BYU is a juggernaut of an application. It requires a lot more essays, and it's a lot of work, okay? You have a couple letters of recommendation. 2 to 3 are required. You need to have one from a high school teacher in a core subject, one from your seminary teacher, and then another recommender that you can choose. right? And once you select, whoever you want to be to be a recommender, BYU will send them a link, and they can fill out the letter of recommendation from that link. Also, you'll need transcripts, but you'll self-report going into it, and then if you're accepted, then you'll need to send in your transcripts afterwards. And you got to make sure that they match, right? Or else you're going to lose your spot of admission. Plus, you have to have an ecclesiastical endorsement from 2 religious leaders, to kind of make sure you understand the BYU honor code. So again, the key thing here is compared to most colleges, the BYU application is a really big application, and it requires a lot of work. So let's talk about what BYU used to do in their application, now what they do today, and how you can navigate that a little bit more effectively. So what BYU used to do is that they had a quantitative and a qualitative approach, right? Quantitative, they looked at your GPA and your ACT or SAT score, right? That's the quantitative, that's the hard numbers. And then they had a qualitative side where they looked at your essays and the extracurricular activities. Now, they had a huge list for extracurricular activities where you could really shore up all the activities that you've done. But over time, they discovered that people were just doing a bunch of activities and there wasn't as much depth. And they wanted to make sure that students were really engaging in things for the right reasons. So a couple years ago, they adjusted, where they got rid of the extracurricular list, and instead they added 2 extracurricular essays. So now you have the GPA and ACT, and you have a heavy amount of essays that are considered, okay? Plus letters of recommendation and ecclesiastical endorsements. So this is a much more subjective application where, again, your essays are going to really matter in this process. Now, the question is, okay, so what are they looking for? Well, BYU consistently stresses that they're wanting to see that you align with the aims of a BYU education, and there are 4 of them, right? A BYU education is supposed to be spiritually strengthening, intellectually enlarging, and character building, as well as leading to lifelong learning and service, right? So they're looking for these attributes of students who are going to stand out and who are going to be successful at BYU. Now, the question is, how on earth do you communicate all of these, kind of complicated and sometimes difficult to define things, right? So let's talk about some strategies that you can use not only for BYU, but strategies that are going to help you apply to every other college. Now, when we talk about and work with these higher level strategies, you'll find that it actually takes care of mentioning and focusing on those BYU aims of their education, right? So let's talk about a couple things. Let's kind of lay the groundwork here with some fundamental principles. You got to understand that in college admissions, job applications, and sales pitches later in life, you guys, people don't accept or reject you. They accept or reject their perception of you. Got to remember, there's a gap between your value and how that value is perceived. Now, you're taught to engage in behaviors, and I talk about this in my book, The Influence Mindset, but you're taught to engage in behaviors that you learn in school that you think is closing that gap, but in reality, it's actually widening that gap, okay? There are 2 skills you need to have in life to be successful. One is to transform your value, right, and transform yourself, and the second is to transform your ability to influence how other people perceive your value. I can't tell you the amount of times where a student would apply and they had really impressive achievements, but then they were denied because they didn't communicate those things to us in the essays. So they'd come in, they'd be very upset, but then we, review their essays and realize they didn't tell us their story. So people don't accept or reject you, they accept or reject their perception of you. And if you can influence how people perceive your value, you have just increased your chances of success. We're going to talk about how you can do that. Because one of the things you got to understand that it's not about being outstanding. It's really about standing out. Because everybody who also is applying to college and BYU are also very outstanding individuals. And if that's all you do is just prove how outstanding you are, then your application is going to be perceived as noise, just like everybody else. So, now that we understand here that college admissions is a lot about influencing people's perceptions about you, and also that's success in life, you guys. Let's talk about a couple strategies, okay? The first strategy is, instead of thinking, how do I get into college, I want you to think in terms of, how do I go beyond college? And it just so happens that when you start thinking and communicating about how you're going to go beyond college, you're going to stand out compared to everybody else who's only thinking about how to get in. Let me break this down for you. Most people, when they apply to BYU, they say things like, I can't wait for the football games, or I love the campus environment and the outdoor lifestyle, which is true, right? BYU offers those things, and it's a great part of attending, BYU or any other university. Now, the problem is, though, is that BYU doesn't exist to provide football games or outdoor lifestyles. BYU sees itself in a different way, as does every other college. Okay, colleges, they see themselves as a bridge. So while everybody else is talking about the perks, prominence, possibilities, and prestige that can come from attending a specific university, the top 10% of people communicate how they're using college like a bridge. Now, a bridge helps you go from one place to another, right? It's trying to get you somewhere. Colleges, they want to help you get into college, but more importantly, they want to see you leave when it's done. They want to help you go somewhere. Now, if you come in and you're like, oh, the football games or the outdoor lifestyle or the dorms or everything, when you make college the destination, then what that does is that's communicating that you're going to go and park right in the middle of the bridge. Now, this is obviously a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. And for those of you who have been there, you may recall that there's a pedestrian lane on the outside of the bridge where you can go, walk, take pictures, ride your bike, have a great time. But the middle of the bridge is actually just a highway. There's no place to really turn out. People are just using it to get across the bridge. Now, what would happen if you were driving along and you're just amazed at the views of the Golden Gate area because it's gorgeous, and you parked your car right in the middle of the road, you got out, you stretched, and you started taking pictures of the surrounding area? Well, what would happen is you get in a car crash. You might even get hurt, right? And the San Francisco people will be incredibly angry. They're going to be throwing kombucha and sourdough at you. I mean, it'd be a really, really bad day. So here's the deal. When you talk in terms of, if BYU sees itself as a bridge, it's trying to help you get somewhere, and you walk in and you're just like, oh, football teams, outdoor lifestyle, you're basically saying, I'm going to come and park in the middle of your bridge and not go anywhere else. So how do we solve this? How do we change and how do we communicate this new way of thinking? Well, a question that I have for people is, okay, so why are you hiring your college, right? Think about it. You're paying them. Ultimately, they work for you. They have a service that you are purchasing to help you live life at a higher level. Now, how does that change things for you? Do you feel like you have a little bit more confidence? Now, granted, of course, they have to admit you, but the thing is, your success in life is more about why are you hiring them and where are you trying to go, right? Now, we got to keep in mind a couple other things. When it comes to success in life, you guys, where you go to college is far less important than why you're going to college. I treat colleges kind of like the hammer wall at Home Depot. It doesn't matter which one you get. It matters more, do you know why you're getting it? Now, I jokingly say, I really don't care about your first day of college. I mean, I do, but I don't. I care more about your second day. And universities, they're thinking about your 100th day, right? The first day of college is a giant party. You're having a great time. You're there. You made it. Congratulations. But then on the second day, that's when everybody wakes up with some existential dread of, what am I doing here? And what am I going to do with my life? But on that second day, I want you to wake up and say, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm hiring this college. And this is what I want to do. And that's because most people use college to figure out what they want in life. But college is really there to help you build the life that you want. And so if everybody's using college to just figure out what they want, you're going to stand out when you have a vision and show this is what I want to do with it, right? Because at the end of the day, you guys, I've sat across the desk from way too many students who all they ever learned how to do was simply get into college. They spent all their high school years learning, how to succeed in high school. But success in high school is about checking boxes and filling someone else's, checklist. But college is all about shaping your life and determining what direction you want to go. And these students who they learn this skill set in high school, they find that all of that has become obsolete on day one of college. So, can you see how when you think in terms of going beyond college instead of getting in, how that's going to make you stand out? Can you see how when you think in terms of why are you hiring this college, that it's going to give you more confidence and you're going to write more powerfully, right? And in turn, that will influence reviewers to choose you. Now, let's go on to the second strategy here that I like to share, and that has to deal with distinguishing between problems and passions. Now, I have two sentences that I'm going to say, and the first one, it will insult some people, okay? And you may scream out in pain and terror and agony based on what I'm about to say here. So can you promise me that you're not going to turn off the computer and run away and never see me again, okay? Just hold on for a second here. Here's the first sentence. Get ready. When it comes to figuring out what you want to do with your life, do not pursue your passions. That's right. Don't pursue your passions. Now, hang on a minute. Before you get angry at me, right? Let's talk about this for a second. How many of you have ever heard the phrase, do what you're passionate about and you'll never work a day in your life, right? I sure have. Thing is, that's simply just not true. And I think that's really unhelpful information. Okay, let's break this down why pursuing your passions with your college application is really unhelpful. First, you sound just like everybody else, okay? Everybody else is sitting there saying, I'm passionate about music, or I'm passionate about sports, or science, or helping people. And if that's the case, again, this is not about being outstanding. It's about standing out. And if you're sounding just like everybody else in the passion parade, you're not going to stand out. So pursuing your passions doesn't really help you. Second, I don't think pursuing your passions really equips you for career success. How many of you are passionate about helping people? I'm sure a lot of you are, right? Now, if you were to ask a therapist, a firefighter, or a financial advisor, why do they do what they do? These wildly different careers would all say, because I like helping or I like working with people, okay? So if your back is up against the wall and someone says, what do you want to do with your life? Right? What career do you want to pursue? And you're like, well, I'm passionate about helping people. Can you see how that actually doesn't prepare you to be successful? Because it doesn't give you any direction on where to go. Third thing is that it creates some false expectations. When you're told, do what you're passionate about and you'll never work a day in your life, right? That leads to the expectation that you should absolutely love your major. You need to be loving the job. And if you're not leaping out of bed with ecstatic joy, then something's wrong with you, or something's wrong with the path. I've seen way too many students who they were on the right path. They were going in the right direction, but they had a false expectation that it should be just easy and just really simple, right? And then therefore they started to think, well, something's wrong with me, or something's wrong, I'm on the wrong path. And they started to have some mental health issues, all because this false expectation of passions making life really, really easy, okay? Guys, can you see how just pursuing your passions, it's a really noble thing, but it actually doesn't really make you stand out when it comes to college applications. So instead of pursuing your passions, I want you to pursue problems that you're passionate about solving, okay? Now let's break down what this means as you pursue problems that you're passionate about solving, okay? So let's say, we have a student who applies. Student number one, they are in love with music. They are phenomenal, virtuosic violinists. They talk in their essays about, I love playing the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto or the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto in D, which are, by the way, phenomenal pieces of music, just in case you're wondering. But, I just love digging in and finding the most complex notes and rhythms and playing, and I love music, right? Now, compare that to a second person who says, I really love music, but more importantly, I love its ability to impact people. In fact, in my high school choir, I saw how music was a great way to help us build, social skills and teamwork and friendships and relationships. And that's really hard for a teenager. So I want to use music as a way to help young people build better social skills and confidence one day as a music educator. That's why I want to go to college. Now, let me ask you this question. If you're given these two applications, this virtuosic prodigy, or the person who's like, I'm wanting to use music to go solve problems and make a difference for other people, who are you more influenced to give the seat to? Now, when I speak to groups, most of them say it's the second one, right? They're more influenced by the person who has a problem they're wanting to solve. Or let's talk about a student who's just really interested in sports, right? Ah, man, love playing sports. I love being really physically fit. I love the feeling of running as fast as I can and just being at the peak level of physical fitness. Or someone who says, I really love sports, and I've had a lot of injuries, and I've had to work with physical therapists to overcome them. And actually, I want to become a physical therapist. Just take my love of sports and use it to become a physical therapist so I can help other athletes overcome the issues and help them heal a little bit better, right? Who, again, are you more influenced by? The person who's like, sports, Sporty McSporterson, right? Or the person who's like, I want to use my passion for sports to learn how I can help other athletes become better and heal. Again, most people that I speak to are more influenced by the second one, okay? Don't pursue your passions. I mean, again, pursue your passion, that's fine, right? But what are the problems that you want to solve? And why are you passionate about those? That is far more influential. So let's talk about some of the other benefits that you get when you talk in terms of problems instead of passions. First off, you're going to stand out, right? You're going to have a purpose. Now, here's the deal. Some Stanford University came up with some research that said that only 80%, so 1 out of 5 students, let me say this right, 1 out of 5 students has a sense for what their purpose is. That means 80% don't. So if you walk into your college application, you're like, this is the vision, this is the problem I have, and therefore this is the purpose I have, you're going to stand out automatically from 80% of other students that don't, right? The other thing is that when we encounter someone of purpose, we are neurologically wired to like them, trust them, and see leadership potential in them, okay? So, boy, you can either write about your passions and get lost in the passion parade, or you can talk about the problems you're passionate about solving, stand out from 80% of people, be liked more, trusted more, and people will perceive leadership potential in you. Which would you like, right? Can you see how this makes a huge difference, you guys? Second, it's going to increase your career outcomes. A research paper I read once said that 85% of the jobs that will exist in 15 years have not even been invented yet. But I guarantee that the problems people have today are still going to exist then. So if you can learn to become literate about what problems people are facing, you have just increased your chances of success in the career space. Because, let me give this example. You're going to have a higher level of value. I had the chance to have a conversation with an Olympian a couple years ago who was transferring from being a full-time athlete to becoming a civilian like the rest of us. And she was offered an entry-level job at a company, and they gave her a salary offer of like $30,000, $35,000. And frankly, she was insulted at how low this offer was. And when I talked to her, she's like, I am literally in the top 10 in the world in what I do. I deserve so much more for my salary. I said, oh, fair enough. I mean, you are one of the top 10 humans on the planet. So I said, so how much are you worth? And she said, oh, my starting salary should be at least $60,000 or $70,000. I said, oh, fair enough. I mean, you have worked really hard. But my question is, what is the $60,000 or $70,000 problem you can solve for that company, right? People aren't hiring you because you have a degree. They're going to hire you because first they have a problem they need solved, and they need somebody to do it. And you need to be able to speak to and understand what that problem is if you want to be hired. So if you want simply a higher value, higher level of salary one day, you got to simply just find problems that people are willing to pay more for, right? That's literally how the job market works. So again, as we think more about problems, you're going to be setting yourself up for success. And then lastly, thinking in terms of problems instead of passions, it builds up resilience. Because you understand, as a problem solver, things aren't always going to be easy. It's not always going to be simple. Sometimes it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. And you're going to be ready to expect that. Okay? So, again, where pursuing passions leads to false expectations and some mental health issues, you can start building resilience right now in simply changing the way you think. Can you see how this simple strategy and focusing on problems you're passionate about solving is going to help you stand out to reviewers, not just for college, but for life, okay? Let's talk about the third strategy is thinking differently about how to write, okay? First, let's talk about the 5-minute review. This past year, UCLA received a record number of applications. They received a 170,000 applications for undergraduate programs. Guys, that's insane, okay? Now, that's a little bit deceiving, though, because It's common practice in college admissions to have every application reviewed twice. So UCLA didn't have to review 170,000 applications. They have to review 34,000 applications. 340,000, sorry guys, yeah, not a math guy. 340,000 applications. How on earth does a little admissions office like UCLA handle that amount of numbers? Well, they hire seasonal readers who are paid on a per application basis on how many they read. So they're incentivized to read as many as possible. Now, one of these guys was in an interview, and they talked about how they are a full-time reader, and they get through about 100 applications a day. Guys, 100 applications divided by 9 hours of work, that comes to about 5 minutes per application. So when people read your application, they're not sitting there in some leather-backed, high-winged chair with their feet propped up on a stool next to a roaring fire, sipping hot cocoa, and luxuriating in every single one of your words and just soaking in the prose that you've written. No. Guys, this is a boxing match with Mike Tyson. You got to get in there and make your points really quick. So how does this change in your perspective of what you need to write? If you know that, it's going to take about 5 minutes for a reviewer to read everything about your entire 4 years. Get to the point. Which brings us to number 2. I can't tell you the amount of times that students have wasted critical space with these large, dramatic, and overdrawn out descriptions. In high school, writing creatively and using, prosaic forms and being very descriptive, that's great. But in college applications, that's wasting time, right? There I am, I'm busy, I'm packed, and a student saying, "The light fell in shafts of gold as it dappled through the fall leaves, and the crunch of the leaves on the ground as I walked rushed up to my ears." Barf! You guys, I'm sorry, I'm just hurling because they're wasting time. That has nothing to do, that doesn't really tell me other than you're a very descriptive writer. How are you going to make a difference on my campus? What is your vision? How are you going to cross the bridge? Where do you want to end up? That's what you got to focus on, not really descriptive stuff that wastes space. 3, got to understand that sometimes there's a word count or a character count limit. You got to make sure that you're writing within those. There are many times where I'd be reading applications where I'm in a story, it's great, and all of a sudden it just cuts off, right? Because that student didn't realize that they were writing over the character count limit. And therefore the system just cuts off. It just cuts it off, you guys. So now, conversely, you don't want to write so under, right? So if I'm giving you a nice big picture frame and you give me a postage stamp size worth of an essay, you're not using the space. So use the space, get up close to the character count limit, right? And just be sure to use the space that's given you. Lastly, I want to talk about stories, okay? It is critical that you use stories as much as possible. Now, what do we mean by that? You guys, here's the temptation that students have is to just cram their application with as many facts, figures, and achievements as possible. And again, I cover why that is in my book. Again, the influence mindset, right? The art and science of getting people to choose you. But facts, figures, and achievements does not persuade. It overwhelms. So you got to be using stories as much as possible to convey what you're trying to do. How do you tell stories, right? Again, I have a process. I work with students on this, and I work with students and families across the country, actually across the world, on helping them learn how to tell stories more effectively, okay? So, again, use stories. Don't just cram in the facts, figures, and achievements. So, at the beginning, we kind of talked about what are the things that BYU is looking for, right? They have the aims of a BYU education is that it's spiritually strengthening, intellectually enlarging, character building, and leading to lifelong learning and service. Can you see how these higher level things, right? Why are you hiring them? What is the problem focus passion that you have? Can you see how that kind of checks a lot of these boxes, right? So by thinking and operating at this higher level, you are going to stand out. Now, let's as we wrap up here, a couple things. I want to talk about some common BYU myths and how you can avoid them. Okay, first, summer term. Everyone thinks, or I get asked every year, is it easier to get into BYU if I apply to summer term, right? Now, while that may have been the case about 20 years ago, it is not the case today. So we got to make sure we put this on the shelf with the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. Although we all know that Bigfoot is real. Okay, let's just be honest here, you guys. So now there are some benefits in applying to summer term that have nothing to do with admissions, right? Campus is empty. You get an easier job getting campus jobs that will carry you into fall. Smaller classes. Provo is fantastic in the summer. There's so many things to do. Plus, you get a first pick on housing in front of everybody else who's coming in the fall, right? So there's some other benefits. But as far as admissions is concerned, it makes no difference. Spring, summer, and fall students are all considered in the same batch together. Number 2, let's talk about ACT tests. Does BYU look at super scores? As in, if you took a bunch of tests, right? They look at your highest, math, highest language. No, they just look at your highest composite single score. Is it okay to send in multiple scores to BYU? Yeah, they're only going to look at your highest one. If you send in 10 scores and they're all different, first of all, they're going to feel really sad for you that you had to take so many of the ACT tests because it's so dang hard. But they're only going to consider the highest one, okay? Now, which brings us to the third thing is the test optional questions. Should you or should you not submit your ACT score? My advice is if you're not hitting a 27, then don't submit your ACT, right? So that's kind of the game that we got to be hitting here. 27 is it. Now, next year, the test optional option is going to be gone, right? Everyone's going to have to submit their test score. So this is the last year that you can do test optional. Highly recommend that you just take into consideration. If you have any questions, again, happy to meet with you, see how I can help in any way. The last thing is transferring. So let's just say that you are denied and you're like, well, I'll just attend a semester somewhere and then I'm going to transfer back to BYU, okay? There's some good thoughts in there, but we got to make sure we understand what transferring means, okay? First, there's 2 ways to apply to BYU. One, as a new freshman applicant, and second, as a transfer student. The way you become a transfer student is by having 24 completed credit hours on your record. Like they're graded, they're done, they're on your record, okay? Up until that point, right? Up until, let's say you're taking classes, if you have 23 and a half credits, you're still a new freshman applicant, which means your high school grades and ACT is going to take precedence over your college work. However, the moment you switch over to 24 graded completed hours, your college work is now going to be activated and your high school GPA and ACT are going to be deactivated, okay? And I definitely recommend that you try and get at least a 3.8 or above on your transfer work if you're going to want to be successful in applying, right? So let's talk about this. Let's say that you're denied, right? And you come in like summer term or spring term and you're taking like 12 credits, which is insane, independent study and, regular in-person classes, flex GE, whatever you're doing. Let's say spring and summer, you take 12 credits and then fall semester, you are enrolled for a second 12 credits, okay? So you've completed 12 and you're enrolled for another 12. By the time you apply, by either of the deadlines, November 1st or December 15th, this second set of 12 credits, will they be completed or in progress? And the answer is that they're in progress. So therefore, by the time you apply, let's say again, you're denied, you just take a bunch of credits, you're trying to get to that 24. By the time the deadline hits for BYU, you will still not have 24 completed credits. You're going to still be a new freshman applicant, right? So therefore, you're going to be considered as a new freshman for the next cycle. So you won't be a transfer student. So my recommendation is if you're denied somewhere, go to a 4-year institution where you can dig in, have a fantastic time, join part in the student experience, buckle down, get those 24 credits, and then in the summer after your freshman year, apply for the following winter semester at BYU, okay? That's probably the fastest, most effective, and I'd say, mental health-wise, probably the best way to do it, okay? Go in, have a fantastic time at a 4-year institution, get those 24 credits, and then transfer as soon as you can. that's my advice, right? Just to help you do that. You can't just transfer after one semester. Now, if you've got any other questions, happy to connect, see how I can help you. Also, BYU has admissions counselors where they can help you as well. Now, again, at the beginning here as we wrap up, I talked about my free report, the 3 essential questions. We've talked about some of them today on every college application, how to answer them. I go through how 90% of people typically approach the college application and how you can behave and sound just like the top 10% and how you think differently, okay? To get a copy of that, again, simply go to topcollegeguru.com/BYU. And if you'd like to have any other resources, my book, The Influence Mindset, The Art and Science of Getting People to Choose You, is totally available. Guys, my goal is not just to help you get into college, but help you be successful for the rest of your life. The principles of when I work with families, the things that I teach, have come from working behind the scenes at every major crossroads that students are going through: undergraduate admissions, graduate admissions, corporate HR, and beyond. When I work with students and families, I'm not here just to help you learn snazzy or witty or catchy writing techniques. I'm here to transform how you think about yourself. If you want to have a better application, you got to have better writing. But if you're going to have better writing, that needs to come from better thinking. And better thinking comes from a higher level of how you think and believe in yourself. That's my job. My name is Christian Hansen, and I'm the Top College Guru. Thank you so much for attending or watching this video on how to stand out to BYU, right, and how in any other college as well. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Here's my email, christian@topcollegeguru.com. And again, feel free to access the report. Thank you so much. And if I can be of any service to you to help you succeed in your life and learn how to stand out, rise above the noise, and influence decision makers to choose you, don't hesitate to reach out. Take care, guys. Have a great one. And best of luck with your college application. Bye for now.